What is going on, guys? Welcome back to The Shelf, and today we are talking about the new M. Night Shyamalan movie, Trap. Now, I realize I'm very late on this one. Time got away from me. I didn't hear the best things about it, so I'm just getting around to it now. The price dipped to $10 to rent, so I figured that was a good place to be at for taking the plunge. So when I heard the premise for this film and then subsequently saw the trailer, I was very intrigued. It's got that sort of classic M. Night simplicity as far as the approach. It's a really easy movie to explain to someone, and the hook is immediately interesting. Josh Hartnett is playing this serial killer, and we're going to watch him cunningly and cleverly elude authorities whilst also not alerting his daughter, who is at this Taylor Swift-esque concert. That's just an incredibly enticing plot that anyone can get invested in. It's very easy to understand. However, as we're going to talk about, I found that M. Night was either unable or unwilling to successfully navigate that approach and ultimately left us with what I would consider to be a pretty disappointing experience. Now, before we get into it, I just want to warn you guys that this is going to be a spoiler-filled video. I figure enough time has gone by at this point that a lot of you have probably seen it already. So if we need to get into the nitty-gritty here, we can do so. Starting out with my positives, I just want to point out that the reason that this movie is as high for me as it is, which isn't very much, granted, but the only reason that it is almost solely because of how good Josh Hartnett is. He is so fun to watch. You can tell that he's having a great time with this character and with this approach and with this role. And he's just having a ball. He chews up the scenery. His facial acting is great. He's really expressive in this film, and it's just so fun to watch him navigate each scenario, for the most part, that he finds himself in. Some of the scenes, whether or not they make sense, it's fun to see Josh Hartnett in those scenarios. He's just a joy to watch in this film. My other positive is that the film looks very good. The cinematography is pretty great. The scenes in the concert hall specifically, with the lighting and everything, it was all really well done. The production value was there. It felt like a real concert. So in that regard, it did what it was trying to do. And then kind of my last positive here is sort of just the fact that the first act is really good. It does a great job of sort of hooking you in. You're able to buy into the situation, and you're along for the ride, essentially. You're ready to go on this journey, and you're basically saying, all right, movie, like, let's see how, you're able to navigate this setup. I'm ready, I'm excited. It's easily the best part of the movie. So my negatives are kind of just one big negative, and that is the amount of plot contrivances and logical inconsistencies in this film drags it down significantly for me. It ruins the film for me. It's egregious. The majority of these issues are found in the second and third acts, specifically the third act. Not only are these problems very present in the third act, but the third act itself also drags. It's paced very weirdly. It doesn't know when to end. And it's sort of just the worst part of the film. And by the time you're in the third act, you are, in my opinion anyway, you're very ready for the film to be over because you just kind of are not invested anymore. The thing about this film is that if you don't like it, the defenders of the film are very quick to say that it's supposed to not make sense. That's what makes it good. That's just M. Night's style. You're thinking about it too much, any and all of that stuff. If you like this movie, I think that's awesome. I wish that I had liked it. I was super bought in. I really wanted to like it, but I was not able to. My problem is that the film was marketed as being this very interesting cat and mouse game where Josh Hartnett cunningly eludes capture in increasingly interesting ways. Initially, the film sort of delivers on that, but as the film progresses, it becomes increasingly clear that M. Night Shyamalan was perhaps just not clever enough to land the plane in a way that was satisfying. He was not able to craft the story in a way that was both logically sound and entertaining. He leaned too far into the entertaining side and didn't bother to make sure that the film made logical sense. And it does not, believe me. This is not a film that is intended to be an outright comedy, where real-world logic just doesn't matter. Because the film relies very heavily on real-world logic, but simultaneously dismisses it when it's convenient to do so. The film has comedic moments, but if the interest is also to be able to make us buy into the stakes of the film, well then I would say that it fails in that regard. The film goes into like the struggles of wanting to balance your work and home life while also keeping them separate. It touches on fatherhood, it wants to tackle the psyche of serial killers, and it also deals with the theme of like being able to forgive people and, you know, absolve them of their, you know, sins against you in the name of like preserving your own mental health. These themes are all interesting and worthy of exploration, but the vehicle that M. Night uses to deliver these themes is a film that just makes no logical sense whatsoever. The film wants to have its cake and eat it too. It wants us to think that Josh Hartnett's character is this like really cool and calculated killer who is always one step ahead and will do anything to elude capture, while also not alerting his daughter to the fact that he is a serial killer and all of this is going on around her. Because at the end of the day, he is a serial killer and a monster, but he's also kind of a good dad and like doesn't want to ruin her day. Like, it's not solely just because he doesn't want to be caught. He also wants to preserve her innocence and, you know, keep her out of it, because really she's not supposed to be involved in all of this, but she is because they set a trap for him. So, like, you know. But the film also contradicts these things because in some scenes, Josh Hartnett's character will do things that are very crafty and very clever, and then in other scenes he will do things that make no logical sense and are not consistent with his character, and the reason that it has to happen is because the plot needs to happen. And that to me is just not good writing. So when people tell me that this film is intended to be a little goofy and that it doesn't matter if it makes sense or not, I'm inclined to provide the counterpoint that perhaps that stance is just a crutch used to justify lazy and bad writing. Because I know that you could have had this same plot with these same themes, and you could have done it in a way that makes sense, but also successfully and effectively delivers on those themes. Like, you could have done both. They're not mutually exclusive. It's very frustrating because I can see the better version of this same movie in my head that, you know, would have just been a lot better than what we got, in my opinion. But M. Night reportedly just cranked the script out and decided that the logical aspect of the film doesn't matter, and I'm expected to just kind of forgive it just because it's M. Night. I'm sorry to say, but like, M. Night does not have enough goodwill built up with me these days that I'm willing to ignore the plot contrivances found in Trap. I don't care if it's Steven Spielberg. If it's bad writing, it deserves to be called out. The guy might have made some great films in the 90s and the 2000s, but that doesn't mean that you're just exempt for the rest of your career from being subject to scrutiny. Look, I realize that at the end of the day, this is all just my opinion, and that if this movie worked for you, well, you're not wrong for thinking that, obviously. You know, it's just a preference thing, and it's going to depend on the person whether or not it's an issue. For me, and a lot of others I'm aware, it is an issue. You know, I think that the script probably could have used a second or third pass, because this very much feels like a rough draft to me. The setup and the lead actor are really dynamite, but it kind of feels to me like M. Night felt like those two things were enough, and then the rest of the script and, you know, everything in between was not that important, you know? And that, like, we just really shouldn't think about it too critically, which I just have to disagree with. I'm sorry. I'm someone who believes that in certain types of movies, rules matter. I'm someone who believes that for me to be able to buy into a story, a character, or a situation, there needs to be easily understandable stakes and rules, and a system of checks and balances in place to support those stakes and rules. A movie about a serial killer eluding capture from the FBI is a movie that I would consider to be something that needs to have rules that matter. In Trap, the stakes are virtually zero because if it's convenient for the plot, anything can and will happen. So at the end of the day, maybe this is just like a me problem, you know? Maybe I just wasn't able to meet the movie on its own terms. And if that's the case, then, you know, maybe that's fine. I can accept that. I just kind of think that, in my opinion, M. Night does himself a disservice by not taking this really cool premise and making it as tight and cohesive as I know it could have been. There is a version of this film that's able to balance the comedy, the stakes, the tension, and the logic. I think that the old M. Night would not have been this complacent, you know, so maybe I think he's just gotten a little sloppy in his old age. I don't know. This is all just my own opinions, but, you know, I'd like to think there's at least a few of you out there who agree with me. So what did you think of Trap? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'm open to discussing this and maybe even having my mind change. So if you liked Trap, please tell me why. I'm genuinely curious to know. Anyway, like the video, subscribe if you haven't. We talk about horror, physical media, and movies in general. So if that sounds like your thing, then you're definitely in the right place. And with all that being said, remember to take care and watch more movies.